The moment I signed away custody of my 2 children in open court, my husband threw his head back and laughed. Not a quiet chuckle. A full, ringing laugh that bounced off the wood-paneled walls of the Harris County Family Courthouse. Judge Delgado had to tap his gavel twice to restore order. My husband's attorney placed a hand on his arm, but Marcus couldn't help himself. He leaned over to his lawyer and whispered something I couldn't hear, but I saw the grin, the same grin he wore every time he believed he'd outsmarted someone. Across the aisle, I sat perfectly still. My attorney, a quiet woman named Diane, who I trusted with my life, gave my hand a single reassuring squeeze and said nothing. "Your Honor," I said, my voice steady. "I voluntarily relinquish primary custody of my children, Lily, age 7, and Noah, age 4, to their father. I also waive all claims to the marital residence, joint savings, and the family vehicle." Judge Delgado removed his glasses and studied me for a long moment. "Mrs. Whitfield, do you understand the full implications of what you're agreeing to today?" "I do, Your Honor." "And you are not under any form of duress or coercion?" "No, sir. This is my decision." He glanced at Marcus, then back at me, clearly uncomfortable. But the law required him to accept a voluntary agreement if both parties consented, and there was no visible evidence of manipulation. He signed the order. The clerk stamped the documents. And just like that, on paper at least, I had nothing. Marcus stood up immediately, buttoning his blazer with the satisfied precision of a man closing a deal. He didn't look at me, he didn't need to. In his mind, the war was over. He had won the house in Katy, the savings account, the Tahoe, and most importantly, the kids. He believed I had crumbled under pressure, just as he always said I would, too soft, too emotional, too naive to fight back. He walked out of the courtroom with his attorney trailing behind him. I watched him push through the double doors without turning around. Diane exhaled slowly beside me. "You okay?" I picked up my bag, tucked the folder of signed documents inside, and stood. "I'm fine," I said. "Everything starts now." I walked out of the courthouse into the thick Houston heat. The air pressed against my skin like a damp towel. I pulled out my phone and typed a single message to a number I had memorized but never saved. "It's done. He took everything. Meet me tomorrow at 9. Then I deleted the message thread, slipped the phone back into my pocket, and drove to my sister's apartment where I had been staying for the past 3 weeks. That night, I didn't sleep. Not because I was afraid. Because my mind was running through every step of what was coming next, and I could not afford a single mistake. Let me take you back 6 months. That's when everything unraveled. Not in a dramatic explosion, but in the quiet way things fall apart when you finally stop ignoring the cracks. Marcus and I had been married for 9 years. We met when I was 24 and he was 28, both of us young and optimistic in a way that feels almost embarrassing to remember now. He was a project manager at a mid-sized construction firm. I was a third-grade teacher at a public school in the suburbs. We weren't rich, but we were comfortable, or so I believed. Over the years, Marcus started his own contracting company, Whitfield Built. It grew fast. Too fast, I realize now. He hired aggressively, took on massive projects, bought equipment on credit. He talked about the business constantly, always in terms of momentum and expansion, never in terms of profit or debt. When I asked questions, he waved them away. "You handle the kids, I'll handle the money. That's how this works." And I let him. That's the part I still sit with. I let him draw the lines of our marriage, and I stayed inside them because it was easier than fighting. Because every time I pushed back, he had a way of making me feel small, not through shouting, but through silence. Cold, calculated silence that could last for days until I apologized for something I hadn't done. The first crack appeared in January. I had taken Lily to the dentist and stopped at the bank on the way home to deposit a birthday check from my mother. The teller frowned at her screen and said, "Ma'am, were you aware there's a second checking account linked to your name?" I wasn't. I asked her to show me. She couldn't give details without Marcus present since it was a joint business account, but what she said next made my stomach drop. "There's significant activity on it. You may want to review the statements." That night, while Marcus was out, I searched his home office. He kept it locked, but Lily had found the spare key months ago while playing hide and seek, and I had quietly made a copy. Inside the desk drawer, buried under tax folders, I found a stack of loan documents. 3 separate lines of credit, each one opened under both our names. The total was over $400,000. My signature was on every single one. But I hadn't signed them. My hands shook as I photographed each page. Some of the signatures looked close to mine. Others were sloppy, rushed, clearly done by someone who didn't care about accuracy because they never expected anyone to check. Attached to the applications were employment verification letters claiming I was a senior operations manager at Whitfield Built, earning a 6-figure salary. I had never worked a single day at his company. There were fake pay stubs, fabricated W-2 forms, even a forged letter of recommendation from a company I had never heard of. I put everything back exactly where I found it, locked the office, and sat in the dark kitchen for 2 hours, processing what I had just seen. My husband had stolen my identity. He had used me as collateral to keep a business alive that was clearly drowning. And he had done it without a shred of hesitation. The next morning, while Marcus was at a job site, I made 2 phone calls. The first was to Diane Herrera, a family attorney my sister had used years ago. The second was to a private investigator named Paul Ochoa, who came recommended by Diane herself. I told both of them the same thing. I need to know everything. And I need him to never find out I'm looking. Over the next 4 months, Paul built a case file that made me physically ill. Marcus wasn't just in debt. He was in catastrophic, irreversible financial collapse. Whitfield Built and hemorrhaging money for over 2 years. He had underbid 3 major contracts to beat out competitors, then couldn't deliver on time or within budget. Suppliers were threatening liens. Subcontractors were filing complaints. 2 homeowners had already retained attorneys for defective work on a subdivision project in Cyprus. And the money from the fraudulent loans? Paul traced every dollar. A significant chunk went to emergency payroll to keep the company running through last winter. Another portion went to equipment leases he couldn't afford. But the part that made me go quiet, the part I had to read twice, was this. Roughly $90,000 had been funneled into a personal account that paid for a luxury apartment in Montrose. The lease was under the name Jenna Calloway. Paul slid a photograph across the table. Marcus and a woman, maybe 26 or 27, walking out of a restaurant on Westheimer. His arm around her waist. Her head leaning against his shoulder. They looked like a couple in love. This has been going on for at least 2 years, Paul said. She's a real estate agent. They met through his business. He paused. The apartment, the dinners, a trip to Cabo last spring. All funded through the credit lines he opened under your identity. I stared at the photograph until the faces blurred. The betrayal wasn't just emotional, it was architectural. He had built a secret life using pieces of mine, my name, my credit, my trust, and he had done it so casually that it felt like breathing to him. Paul continued. Here's the other thing. His company is facing a lawsuit from the Cyprus homeowners. Structural defects, substandard materials, fraudulent inspection reports. If that case moves forward, and it will, the liability falls on whoever owns the company. Right now, that's Marcus. But if he tries to dissolve the business or shift assets during the divorce, it'll trigger an investigation. I sat with that for a long time. Then I asked Diane a question that changed everything. If Marcus takes all the marital assets in the divorce, does he also take the debt? Diane looked at me carefully. Under Texas law, if he accepts full ownership of the assets through a voluntary agreement, yes. The liabilities attached to those assets follow him, including the fraudulent loans, even if they were opened under your name, because they were used to fund marital and business expenses. Especially if we can prove he forged your signatures. And the Cyprus lawsuit? If he retains sole ownership of Whitfield Built through the settlement, the liability stays with him entirely. That was the night I stopped being afraid and started planning. I spent the next 2 months quietly preparing. Diane helped me separate my personal finances into a protected account. Paul gathered sworn statements from bank employees who had flagged irregularities on the loan applications. A forensic handwriting expert compared my authentic signatures with the ones on the loan documents and confirmed what I already knew. They were forgeries. We even obtained records showing I was at a teacher conference in San Antonio on the day one of the largest loans was signed in person at a Houston bank branch. I documented everything. I photographed everything. I told no one except Diane and Paul, not even my sister, because Marcus had a way of reading people, and I couldn't risk even the slightest shift in my behavior, tipping him off. When Marcus filed for divorce, citing irreconcilable differences, I didn't fight it. When he demanded primary custody, claiming I was emotionally unstable and financially dependent, I didn't argue. When his attorney sent over a settlement proposal that gave him literally everything, I signed it, willingly, calmly, without a single objection. Because I knew exactly what he was taking. The evening after the hearing, Marcus threw himself a celebration. He took Jenna to Pappas Bros. Steakhouse downtown, ordered $200 bottles of wine, ate filet mignon, and told her they'd be moving into the Katie house within the week. He promised her a complete renovation, new kitchen, new master bath, maybe a pool. Jenna raised her glass. To our fresh start. Marcus clinked it with a smirk. She didn't even fight. Signed it all away like a scared little girl. I always told you she wasn't smart enough to play this game. They ordered dessert. They ordered more wine. Marcus tipped 40% because he felt generous, powerful, untouchable. At approximately 7:45 the next morning, his phone rang, then it rang again. Then, 3 more times before he finished his coffee. The first call was from Lone Star National Bank. Mr. Whitfield, we're calling regarding the outstanding balance of $160,000 on your line of credit. With the finalization of your marital settlement, full repayment responsibility has transferred to you as the sole asset holder. We need to discuss immediate payment arrangements. The second call was from Gulf Coast Credit Union. Same message, different numbers. $120,000, past due, transferred to him. The third was from a commercial lender connected to Whitfield Built, another $140,000. They weren't asking, they were demanding. Marcus called his attorney in a panic. His attorney called Diane. Diane sent a single-line email back. The settlement was voluntary and legally binding. My client has no further obligations. Within 48 hours, Marcus discovered that every asset he had taken from me was buried under debt he didn't know existed, debt he had created himself, using my name, without ever thinking it would come back to find him. The house in Katy had 2 liens on it he had never disclosed. The savings account had been used as collateral for a business loan that was now in default. The Tahoe was leased through the company, and the lease payments were 3 months behind. Even the modest investment portfolio he had bragged about was frozen, pending a fraud investigation triggered by the forged employment documents. He tried to call me. I didn't answer. He showed up at my sister's apartment, pounding on the door at 11 o'clock at night, shouting my name. My sister called the police. They escorted him off the property and noted the incident in their report. 3 days later, the Cypress homeowners officially filed their lawsuit against Whitfield Built. The damages sought exceeded $600,000. As sole owner of the company, Marcus was personally named in the suit. His insurance carrier, upon reviewing the allegations of fraudulent inspection reports, denied coverage. And then came the part even I hadn't fully anticipated. Paul Ochoa had quietly forwarded his findings to the Harris County District Attorney's Office. The forged loan documents, the fake pay stubs, the fabricated employment records, all of it. A detective called me on a Tuesday afternoon and asked if I'd be willing to provide a formal statement. I said yes. Marcus was arrested on a Thursday morning outside a job site in Spring. 2 plainclothes officers approached him in front of his crew. The charges were identity theft, forgery, and bank fraud. He was handcuffed in the parking lot while his employees watched through the chain-link fence. Jenna vanished within the week. She didn't visit him. She didn't call. She cleared out of the Montrose apartment before the lease was even terminated. Paul told me he saw her Instagram 2 weeks later, photos from a rooftop bar with a man in a tailored suit. She had moved on before the dust settled. The criminal trial took place 4 months later in the same courthouse where I had signed away everything. The gallery was full. Local news had picked up the story. A teacher defrauded by her own husband wasn't just a legal case. It was the kind of story people needed to hear. I took the witness stand on the second day. The prosecutor walked me through the timeline calmly, methodically. I presented the forged documents side by side with my authentic signatures. I showed the hotel receipt from San Antonio, dated the same day a loan was signed in my name at a Houston bank. I described the nights Marcus shoved paperwork across the kitchen counter and told me to sign without reading. I kept my voice even. I didn't exaggerate, I didn't cry, I just told the truth. When the defense attorney cross-examined me, he tried to suggest I had been complicit. That I must have known about the loans. That no reasonable adult signs documents without reading them. I looked at him directly and said, I trusted my husband. I was wrong to trust him. But trust is not a crime, fraud is. The courtroom was silent for a moment, even the court reporter paused. Marcus took the stand the next day. He stumbled through his answers. He contradicted himself twice within 10 minutes. When confronted with the forensic handwriting analysis, he claimed the expert was biased. When shown the fake W-2 forms, he said his accountant must have made a mistake. When asked about Jenna, he went quiet for so long the judge asked if he needed a recess. The jury deliberated for less than 5 hours. Guilty on all counts. Judge Delgado sentenced Marcus to 3 years of probation, mandatory financial restitution, and a permanent restraining order. He also, in a moment I will never forget, turned to me and said, Mrs. Whitfield, the court acknowledges the extraordinary composure and courage you have shown throughout these proceedings. Your testimony was not only credible but essential to the pursuit of justice in this case. The court wishes you well. I lowered my eyes. Not from weakness. From relief. A quiet, bone-deep relief that after 9 years of silence, someone with authority had finally said out loud what I had known in my gut for years. I was not the one who was broken. After the trial, I filed a motion to regain custody of Lily and Noah. With Marcus's criminal conviction, the fraudulent financial records, and the documented history of deception, the court granted me full custody within 6 weeks. The morning I picked them up from my mother-in-law's house, Lily ran to me so fast she nearly knocked me over. Noah just wrapped his arms around my neck and whispered, I missed you, Mommy. I held them so tight I thought my heart would crack open. I went back to teaching that fall. 3rd grade again, same school, same hallway that smelled like dry erase markers and orange peels. My principal told me the staff had followed the case in the news. She didn't make a big deal of it. She just handed me my class roster and said, Welcome back, Claire, we're glad you're here. That winter, Diane introduced me to a nonprofit called Second Foundation that provided legal aid and financial counseling to women who had experienced economic abuse. I started volunteering on weekends, sitting across from women who reminded me of myself, women who had signed things they didn't understand, who had trusted someone who turned that trust into a weapon. I helped them read documents. I helped them understand their rights. I helped them see that confusion is not consent, and silence is not agreement. A year later, I was asked to join the board. I said yes. One evening, after a board meeting, I was walking to my car in the parking garage when I heard someone call my name. I turned around and saw a woman in her early 20s, dark circles under her eyes, holding a folder against her chest like a shield. Mrs. Whitfield? She said hesitantly. My name is Ava. I saw your interview on the news. I think my boyfriend has been opening credit cards in my name. I don't know what to do. I'm scared. I looked at her, and I saw every version of myself I had ever been. The one who didn't ask questions. The one who signed without reading. The one who stayed quiet because staying quiet felt safer than speaking up. I walked over to her, gently took her arm, and said, Come sit with me, we're going to figure this out together. You're not alone anymore. She cried. I didn't. I had done my crying a long time ago. These days, my apartment is small, but it's mine. Lily has a reading corner by the window where she devours chapter books faster than I can buy them. Noah builds elaborate Lego cities on the living room floor that I'm not allowed to touch until he says the construction is complete. Some evenings, after the kids are asleep, I stand on the tiny balcony with a cup of tea and watch the Houston skyline flicker in the distance. I don't think about Marcus much anymore. I heard through Diane that he lost the company. The house was auctioned. The Cyprus lawsuit settled for an amount that will follow him for years. He moved in with his mother somewhere near Beaumont. I don't know if he ever understood what happened to him or if he still believes the world cheated him out of something he deserved. What I know is this. I walked into that courtroom and gave away everything because I understood something Marcus never could. The things he wanted, the house, the money, the car, they were already poisoned. He had poisoned them himself, with every forged signature, every stolen dollar, every lie he told to keep his crumbling world standing. All I had to do was let him take them. And the things that mattered, my children, my name, my dignity, my future, those were never his to take, they were always mine. He just didn't know it. And by the time he figured it out, it was already too late. If you're listening to this, and you see yourself in any part of my story, I want you to hear me clearly. Silence is not safety, trust is not weakness. And walking away from everything doesn't mean you've lost. Sometimes, it means you're the only one in the room who knows exactly what's coming next. Thank you for listening. If this story meant something to you, leave a comment telling me where you're watching from. I read every single one. And if you or someone you know is going through something similar, there are people who can help, you just have to take that first step. I'll see you in the next one.